Okay, so once I've got the head and the body both there and all of the clay pieces and they've all been baked and cooled, then I can start assembling the body. So this is one bit of kit that you do need, which is a long doll needle. It's just a lot longer than a standard one and allows you to stitch right the way through. So attaching the head to the body is through one big long stitch back and forth, which then allows the how to be able to turn. So it's quite tricky, you have to pull it quite tight and then squeeze the body back into shape. I ended up going off camera an awful lot in this one. So just rolling the body there to get it round again. And it's really important that these ends are secure. And so I'm just stitching on the limbs there. This one went off way off. So I'll show you how the legs are stitched on. It's exactly the same as the arms. So stitched into the body and then through the leg, added a bead on the end and then rethread the needle. So this goes back through the leg, back through the body to the other side. I'm not pulling tight, just keeping everything nice and loose. So it goes through the leg, add the bead, and then the needle again, and then it's stitched through, back through the leg, and then through to the other side. It's a little bit tricky getting the needle back through. And then, here comes the magic. I'm pulling that one through tight first, and then the other, and then you have a fully rotating leg. So I loop the thread through, and pull that stitch nice and tight. You want to put a couple of knots in there, so that it doesn't come on loose. And then stitch the thread back through the body so that the loose end is tucked right through. And on this, because I'm stitching wings on, I'm then using the extra thread to start stitching those wings on there. So I ended up doing this exactly the same of stitching through adding a bead, and then adding the needle on the end and stitching through. And the same on the other side. This gets quite fiddly. So now those wings have been stitched on, you can see they're hugging quite close to the body, and I just want to pull them out a little bit more. We can do this by actually stitching into the body and using tension to then pull them slightly away. So I'm stitching into the back there and then through forward onto the chest and then back, and that's just a little needle sculpt which changes the shape. Again, making sure that thread is tied off really tight. And there we go. So all the limbs move just really nicely. And I'm just pulling off and tying the end of the thread at the bottom. And then back up through the head. You can leave plenty messy stitches on the head because we're going to add the face on top of this bit. And there we go. You can squeeze the body and mold it slightly at this point because the wadding is quite forgiving. So I have my face now, and I'm just using hot glue. This bit's quite tricky because it's very difficult to remove if you mess it up. And there we go. So now I just need to add some little details. So I've got some plain acrylic paint. I have a slightly ruined old brush, because I'm going to stipple on this acrylic to go underneath the moss texture. So I had a little bit on the top of the head where it didn't quite stick down properly, and this is the wonderful thing about the moss, is it can hide these little blemishes that didn't turn out quite. It's really lovely for blending the fabric sections with the clay sections. I ended up making this one quite mossy because I got pretty into the moss. Especially mossy noses. So I'm not using an awful lot of paint there. So relatively dry brush, but we're not dry brushing. And so I'm just using a tiny bit of black, but quite watered down. And just going around the details, like where I added those very fine details when I'm doing the face sculpt. Into the jaw, around the teeth, and in those little bits of the cheeks and nostrils. It's really easy to use a little water to take things off if you go a little bit too heavy. So the clay has still quite a shiny texture, but once the acrylic's dried, it bonds really well. So you can get lovely details by adding washes in around the claws, etc. And you can see it really starts coming to life. So I try and balance the details that I add in terms of depth of texture using the acrylics or the pastel. So whilst I've been doing the darker details then, the green I've been working on before has dried a little. So then I'll be able to add the glue and the moss. Acrylic rise nice and quickly. I'm just using another brush, a very fine one. Again, this is a slightly battered one, which isn't going to be too much of a big deal if once I get it covered in glue. It's just a PVA wood glue, so it's a little bit thicker than a standard PVA. I find it works, bonds a little bit better. this is just so much fun. So all the areas you're gluing are going to end up picking up a lot of the mossy texture. So I'm just getting right in there where I added that detail around that seam at the top. And scatter on the moss. I really like this bit. Once you've added some, you can add a little more. You can do it in stages and build it up. You could add the thicker and thinner bits of moss. I might look at getting some of the really hairy stuff to add to some more. And there we go. So once that's all dried, then you can use another soft brush and brush off all the excess. And there we go. Lovely wee fella. So you can see his head turns, his limbs. Ta-da!